Hello students, today will we discuss about David Copperfield as a psychological novel. ओके आज का हमारा टॉपिक है डेविड कॉपरफील्ड साइकोलॉजिकल नॉवल. When we speak psychological fiction, we generally mean the use of proving methods like introspection or analysis, or we mean enveloping techniques like point of view and stream of consciousness which simulate the flow of inner conflict. But there is another kind of fiction, the projected novel, in which surface life recollects the inner self. David Copperfield belongs to that tradition. As the hero views the world, his feelings fuse with outward actions and his selections of events advances inward meaning. In Dickens, outer scenes are real but are made to seem fantastic through projected feelings. In either case, the effect is of surface charged with baffling implication. For Dickens, the creation of that surface came naturally as part of this attempt to master childhood pain. In Copperfield, he had summoned up the most anguished memories of his youth, his wretched job in a blacking warehouse, his rejection by Maria Wendell, and his earlier defeat within the home. With an artist's instinct, he had given form and texture to those episodes, and with genial and expansive humor, he had eased their pain and enlarged their meaning. In chapter 2, the pain begins. His first memories are of his mother and Nurse Peggotty as loving protectors. A fierce cock makes him shiver, and he dreams at night of geese with stretching necks as a man might dream of threatening lions. There are two parlors in the house. In one he sits with Peggotty and his mother in complete security. In the other he feels doleful, for Peggotty has told him of his father's funeral there. When his mother reads to them in the second parlor how Lazarus was raised up from the dead, the boy becomes frightened. They are forced to quiet him that night by showing him the churchyard from his window, with the dead all lying in their graves at rest below the solemn moon. His father lies in one of those graves, and David fears his restrictions. Another night he suddenly asks about marriage. If you marry a person and the person dies, when you may marry another person, may not you, Peggotty? He is worried about the man who walks his mother home from church. When she returns that night, the man is with her, and the boy is jealous of his touch. His name is Murdstone, which David's aunt compares with murder to fit his surface role. But Murdstone also means the murdered man beneath his gravestone, who has risen now to reassert his rights, and Dickens make the tie with conscious skill. One day the boy is jealous of his touch. His name is Murdstone, which David's aunt compares with murder to fit his surface role. But Murdstone also means the murdered man beneath his gravestone, who has risen now to reassert his rights, and Dickens make the tie with conscious skill. One day the boy agrees to a ride with Murdstone seated before on his horse. He looks up at his face and thinks him handsome, especially in his mother's eye. Then they come to the hotel where Murdstone's friends are waiting. David is indeed confused by Murdstone's friends. That night he tells his mother of their talk, which pleases her immensely. Later, later kneeling playfully by his where she makes him repeat their words, bewitching Mrs. Copperfield and pretty little widow. Again she responds with pleasure, and though she kisses him repeatedly, the scene conveys his bafflement at powers which keep her out of range. The next memory is of a trip to Yarmouth arranged with special mystery. He meets Pegotty's family there, and the comedy turns to Mrs. the Iron Lawn creature, who exploits her husband's death for sympathy. With the orphan little Emily, David soon achieves the security of childhood love with no provision for growing older and with greater purity and disinterestedness than can enter into the vast love of latter time of life. His ideal then is sexless love with Emily or his mother. He even indicates that Emily should have toppled into the sea one day and joined her father beneath the waves to avoid her sinful future. Yarmouth scenes advance the major conflict, and on the return trip home, they erupt with sudden force. His nerves become so ill at ease on nearing home that David calls in fear for his mother. He believes she to his dad, but Pegotty cries no and tries to explain her agitation. Master Davy said Pegotty, untying her bonnet with a shaking hand and speaking in a breathless sort of way. What do you think you have got up? I trembled and turned white. Something I don't know what or how connected with the grave in churchyard and the raging of the dead seemed to strike me like an unwholesome wind. The shock jars loose his graveyard, fears he now shakes hands with Lazarus and greets his mother, but he cannot face them. The house seems altered. Later, when he roams into the yard, his feelings suffer. Full projection. I very soon started back from there, for the empty dog kennel was filled up with a great dog, deep-mouthed and black-browed like him, and he was angry at the sight of me and sprang out to get me. This is brilliant psychological fiction. Murdstone has become the raging and revengeful father. His powers involve the mysterious of sex and somehow pull the mother out of range. In the meantime, the voice, hostility, and fear suffuse the outward scene. The projective artistry in unmatched. It comes to the full dramatic focus kept in uninformed by nurse and mother. David has suffered deeply from the news of marriage. The shock might have been lessened if Murdstone had responded with encouragement instead of firmness and distrust. Idyllic spelling lesson once directed by the mother become Gregory under Mudstone and his sister David stumbles in their presence, and when Mudstone brings a king to help his memory, the boy goes blank in the struggle. Then, with a vagueness and locked inside his room, where he reaches helplessly upon the floor outside the wild household commotions is stilled in the unnatural quiet. David crawls to the mirror and sees his face in the glass so swollen, red and ugly that it most frightened me. My strips were sore and stiff and made me cry afresh when I moved, but they were nothing to the guilt I felt. It lay heavier on my breast than if I had been the most atrocious criminal. Most diverse opinions have been expressed as to Dickens' mastery of the highest part of the novelist art, which we call characterization. Undoubtedly, the characters which he drew are included in a limited range. Yet I question whether their range can be justly termed narrow as compared with that commanded by any other great English novelist except Scott, or with those of many novelists of other literature except Balzac. But within his own range of Dickens is unapproached, his novels do not altogether avoid the common danger of uninteresting heroes and insipid heroines. But only a very few of his heroes are conventionally declamatory like Nicholas Nickleby, and few of his heroines simple sentimentally like Rose Mail, nor can I for a moment assent to the condemnation which has been pronounced upon all the female characters in Charles Dickens.